Hello, welcome to the MyClayCo studio. I am Tegan and today I am going to be taking you through the sealers we use on our polymer clay jewelry and other creations. Now this is not an exhaustive list of all of the sealers you can use on polymer clay. These are just the ones that we've tried and tested. So we've used them all for a minimum of 2 years, so we know that they're not going to do anything weird like peel up or go sticky or anything like that. So the sealers I'm going to be showing you today are the Sculpey glazes, the Cernit varnishes, the Ex Varnish, as well as Resin. I'll be taking you through how we apply them, and I'm also going to give you some comparisons so you can actually see what they look like on polymer clay. When we get to Resin, this is going to be a little bit more in depth because I'm going to take you through some of the safety things that you need to be aware of and also how to apply and cure the UV resin. But first, let's have a chat about when you should be sealing your polymer clay. Now, one of the amazing things about polymer clay is that you do not need to seal it. So if you grab your earrings or jewelry or creation out of the oven and you love the look of it, that is fine. You know, if you've got earrings, you can give them a bit of a light sand around the edges and they're ready to go. Polymer clay is a polymer, so it doesn't need any kind of sealant on it for it to be hardy. So there are 2 reasons that you would be adding a varnish or a glaze or a resin to your polymer clay creations. Number 1 would be if you want them to have a different kind of finish, for example, a glossy finish. So if you get your piece and you think, I think this would look great if it had a real glossy shine to it, that is one instance that you might decide that you want to add some kind of sealer on there. Now, you can get those kind of glossy finishes without using a sealer. You can do it with sanding and buffing. There is a bit of skill involved and it does take a bit more time than adding a glaze or a varnish to your piece. But that is something that you can look at doing if you don't want to use one of these varnishes or glazes. The second reason why you should be using a sealer is because you've used some other kind of medium with your polymer clay. So this, for example, could be mica powder, it could be metallic leaf, it could be acrylic paint. There's something in there that you need to seal so that it has the same longevity that polymer clay will. So let's jump into these sealers, and the first one I want to look at are the Sculpey glazes. Now, the reason why I've opted to look at them first is because they are probably our one that we use most often. They are very simple and easy to use. All that you do is literally just brush them onto your clay once it's cooled and they're done and ready to go. When you are brushing on the glaze, you just need to make sure that you're applying a thin coat. If you do put it on too thick, it can pull a little bit and get a little bit claggy. So I do just like to put a nice thin layer of the glaze on there. You will notice when you are glazing your pieces that the glaze is a little bit of a milky white kind of color. Don't worry about that. When it dries, you will find that it dries clear. So if we have a look at the satin and the gloss glaze here, you can see the differences in them are very mild. I do generally use the satin glaze more just because I rarely seal my pieces unless I have to. The satin is slightly less glossy, but there really isn't a huge difference between the two. If we do compare it though to the piece that doesn't have a sealer on it, you can definitely tell that there is a more glossy finish to the piece. The next one we'll have a look at is the Cernit varnish. With these, they do have the matte as well as the glossy one, same as the Sculpey. And I find that the finish is very similar to the Sculpey one. So if we do a comparison side by side, you can see that there isn't a huge difference between the Sculpey glaze and the Cernit glaze. In fact, if I have a look at the pieces that I have varnished over the years, I can't even tell which one was Sculpey and which one was Cernit. Now, one thing that is a little bit different about Cernit is that the manufacturer does recommend that after you've applied the varnish, you do re-bake it in the oven. Now, I'm going to be very honest with you. I don't know exactly why you are meant to rebake it, but I assume that it has something to do with the setting of the varnish. So I do follow the manufacturer's instructions and I do it. If you are looking for the instructions, they are a little bit hidden. So you do need to peel back the label of the Cernit bottle in order to find them. So the next one we are going to look at is the Ex Varnish. Now, I rarely actually use this as just a clear varnish. The way that I normally use it is by mixing in Pearl Ex powders or micas or pigments. That is one of the things that Pearl Ex Varnish is designed for, and it works great. I have these trinket dishes that I would have done a couple of years ago, and they are still looking fantastic. These trinket dishes actually get a lot of wear because I use them to hold a lot of my earrings. So they are constantly having earrings dropped in and taken out and dropped in and taken out. And it's great to see that they don't have any chipping or anything on them. I feel like that's important to point out because with the Sculpey and the Cernit one, they are designed to be used with the polymer clay products. With the Pearl Ex one, it isn't necessarily. So I think it's really important to know that it does have that staying power on polymer clay. I do love this one because it is a great way for you to be able to add some more depth to your pieces by doing the colored varnish. And it saves the 2 steps of, putting the Pearl Ex powder and mica powder on your piece and then going over it with a varnish. With this, you can literally just paint it on like you would a paint, and it's also sealed. With the Pearl Ex one, if we do a comparison side by side with the Cernit and the Sculpey one, you can see that the shine level on it is quite similar. So there's no reason why you can't use this as your normal varnish. So we've been through all of the glazes and varnishes that we use. We're now going to have a bit of a look at the UV resin. Now, I know a lot of people are nervous about using UV resin, and that is because it is really, really important that you take the necessary safety precautions when you are working with it. It can be very dangerous to breathe in, and you can have significant reactions if you were to get it in your eyes or on your hands. And you think to yourself, oh, I'll be very careful, but even something as little as, you've got a tiny bit of resin on your hand and you rub your eye, you're going to end up with a swollen eye, and it is definitely not the look that you want. So it's really important to make sure that you do wear the correct PPE. Now, what is the correct PPE? So I do urge you to do your own research on this. I am not an expert on UV resin and the safety gear that you need to wear. Before we got into UV resin, we actually read the safety data sheets for the resins that we were using. So it is important to have a look at your specific resin that you've got. Check the safety data sheet. If you are buying them online, you'll likely find the safety data sheet on there, but if they don't have one, definitely contact that supplier so that you can find out what the requirements are. So let's run you through the safety gear that we use. So an important one so that we can protect our hands are gloves. The other thing that we have here is our respirator mask. So this is a gas and vapor respirator mask. It is commonly used by painters. And the other one that we have here are goggles, and they are to protect our eyes. The other thing that you can use if you choose to is an apron, and this will just be great so that you can protect your clothes. Now, as I mentioned, we have done our own research, and it's really important that you also do your own research to make sure that you're wearing the correct safety gear. Now, yes, I know what you're thinking, this safety gear isn't very stylish, but it will keep you safe and it will make sure that you don't have any of those horrible allergic reactions. The other important thing with your safety is just to make sure that you're working in a well-ventilated space. So having a room with a window or a fan in it is definitely recommended. Now, one of the misleading things about UV resin is you will find that it generally has low odor or no odor. So you might think, oh, it's safe to use, I can't smell anything, but it does have all of those vapors, and just because you can't smell them doesn't mean that they're not there. All right, enough with all of the safety chat. Just please be careful when you're using UV resin. I do understand the appeal though, because I myself love the look of UV resin. Now, all UV resins are not created equally, and we have found this out by testing multiple resins. Our favorite one is Just Resin, and there's a couple of reasons why it is our favorite. So one of the reasons is that you don't get many bubbles. So that can be a real gripe when you are working with UV resin, that you apply it and you might find that there's heaps of bubbles in there. Now these can be easily popped by just running a lighter over the top of it, but it's definitely better if you're working with a resin that just doesn't have many air bubbles, because it is so easy to miss them. So it's better if you don't have that many to start with. The other thing that we love about Just Resin is when you're applying it, it just seems to be the perfect consistency for doming on earrings. We do make a lot of earrings, so a resin that domes really nicely is important to us, but we do also use this UV resin on little figurines and trinket dishes. The other thing we have found with Just Resin, and something that you need to be aware with resin, is that over time you will find that it yellows eventually. Now we've been very lucky. We've been using resin for a couple of years and we have had pretty much no yellowing on our pieces. So from what I understand, the yellowing is generally caused by UV light or the sun. So I don't know if it's something to do with the way that we store our earrings, or perhaps it could be the brand of resin. But I know with the UV resin, it is made in Australia, and of course we have quite harsh sun here, so there might be something in the formulation that stops the yellowing so much. I did actually do a bit of a test with a couple of my pieces because I hadn't had any yellowing, just to see what would happen. I've had them on the sunny windowsill for a couple of months now, and these are the pieces that I did it with, and I haven't seen any real yellowing. Now I know they're darker pieces, they're probably not the best candidates for us to be checking the yellowing, but if you look at them side by side, there really has been no difference in the way that these earrings look. The resin earrings that I've had for a couple of years, some of them are kept in my jewelry box, some of them are just kept on my bedside table in a trinket dish, and I haven't had any yellowing with them either. So I think it's just important for you to do your research and find out what resins are going to work best for you, which ones are better or worse for yellowing, which ones are better or worse for air bubbles, and find out which resin is going to be best for you. Now with using UV resin, there are a couple of tips that I have for you. So one of them is when you are applying the resin to your piece, I normally do an outline and then I'll kind of color in the middle and then use a silicone tool just to push out the resin. Now the reason why I do an outline first is because resin goes where resin is. So you will find that that blob that you've put in the middle of your piece, it will, as you push it, it will slowly find its way to those edges that you've put there. Speaking of edges, this can be one of the very tricky things about applying resin. So I generally start by pushing the resin out to the edges. I'll then work on the middle of the piece, and then once I finish that, I actually go back and push the resin out again. You will find that if you don't push them out a second time, you may have shrinkage where the resin just pulls in from the sides. I find that pushing it out that second time, that I don't tend to get any shrinkage on my pieces. When you're working with UV resin, you also want to make sure that you're working at the optimal temperature. So you will find that if the room that you're working in is a little bit warm or a little bit cool, that it will affect the viscosity of the resin. That will mean that it can be either too runny to work with or it's too firm for you to move around the piece. Now you also will find that it is best to just work on a couple of pieces at a time. If you were, say, to do a big batch of, 10 earrings, you may find that by the time you get to the second half, that the resin has already started to get a little bit firm and it might be hard to work with. I generally work with 2 to 4 pieces max, just so I can make sure that that resin is at the optimal viscosity for me to be working with it. Another tip that I have picked up along the way is that it's important to run the lighter over your pieces to pop those air bubbles, and something that I have done numerous times is forget to do this step, and then of course my pieces have some little air bubbles in them. So something that you can do so that you don't forget is when you are setting up your station, put your lighter in front of your UV light, and that way you cannot forget to do the lighter step. You will need to move your lighter before you're actually able to push your pieces under the UV light. Now with curing your pieces, this does need to be done under either a UV light or in the sunshine. So if you have a look at the directions on your UV resin, that will tell you how long it needs to be under a UV light or how long you do need to cure it in the sunshine for. You will find that most UV lights unfortunately don't have a continuous timer on them, so you can't say set them for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. That a lot of them just run for 1 or 2 minutes, and this is a lot of the time because they are normally just used for doing nails. So with the majority of lights, because they don't have this continuous mode, you will have to continuously press the button so that you can get your pieces to cure for long enough. So I guess when you are looking for a light, if you can get one that has that continuous mode, then that is a big bonus. We have been using this UV light for a couple of years now with no issues, so I will pop the details of it in the video description for you. Now, if we do look at the UV resin compared to all of the glazes and varnishes, you can tell with these there is a huge difference with the gloss level. The UV resin has a much more glossier finish, and you also get that domed effect on there. So you will get quite a different finish to your pieces if you do put UV resin on them. Thank you so much for watching our video today. I hope you've learned a thing or two about sealants and UV resin. I would love to know, do you work with different varnishes, glazes, or UV resin, and which ones have you found really effective and which ones haven't worked for you? If you do have any questions, of course, we are always happy to help where we can, so drop them below and we'll see how we can help. If you have enjoyed our video today, we would love you to like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.